Welcome to the Rant Live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this version of the Rant, the Saturday, August 19th, 2023 version of the Rant, where, circling back, I think our last show was before the Blue Jays series, and the Cubs didn't do real well against the Mets. They lost 2 of 3. And we were saying that there wasn't anything to worry about, and they performed pretty well against the Blue Jays. Really had a chance to sweep the series on Sunday. Couldn't get it done, but like there wasn't anything too discouraging there. But what we've seen over the last few days since that series, to me, is a little concerning. And like it's not freak out mode, but it is like trying to figure out what the path forward looks like, particularly when you start talking about what we're seeing from the Cubs pitching and that just Smiley is broke, Wisniewski is broke. We've got injuries. There's Stroman's out, and it's just there's a lot to be concerned about over the stretch since August 7th. Which was going back to the Mets series. The Cubs team ERA is 4.96. Their starters have a 5.4 ERA in that stretch. The bullpen has a 4.18 ERA in that stretch. They've scored 18 runs, 3 runs a game, where they've been averaging over 5 runs a game for the season. So it's like everything is kind of going wrong here. And I'm not sure where to start, but I guess we should start on the pitching, right?
Yeah. So very interesting. Am I coming through okay on the sound, by the way? Just
yeah.
I feel like I almost sound echoey to myself.
You do sound a little echoey, but that's okay.
Let me see I might have to adjust this. My daughter was jacking around with this. She and her friends were like recording something. Hold on here. This is high tech.
As you can tell, we prepare well in advance for the show.
A little bit. Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
It's a lot better.
Yeah. So I should probably turn off my flashlight here. So it's very telling that you noted the pitcher's ERA in that time is just shy of 5, right? We're just under 5. Is that correct? And
yeah,
if you go back to the start of the month, okay, so the Cubs have played 15 games this month. They are 2-6 in games in which they score 4 or fewer runs, which makes sense, right? If the pitching has an ERA of 4.96, you've got to score 5 runs. Do you know what happens? You know what has happened? In August, the Cubs have scored 5 or more runs 7 times in August. What do you think their record is in those games?
I'm guessing 7-0.
That is correct. So pretty clear now, and you noted some of those problems, right? Like Stroman, of course, lots of issues there because we know that, well, he may not pitch again this year. And that might not be that bad a thing because he had a 9.00 ERA over his last 7 starts anyway. So, yeah. But, Smiley has been relegated to the bullpen. As we talked about on the last show, I think they would prefer to keep him there for both performance and payment reasons. Even though, pitching in relief is still going to crank that up. The other issues I have, so Justin Steele's been great, but he's given up at least 3 runs in each of his last 3 starts. Now, only 3 earned in each of those, but it's been 5 and 4 and 3 runs, and he's given up like 8 and 8 and 6 hits in each of those. And 2 starts ago, he threw 110 pitches, career high for him. He is now at 126 innings, which is 7 innings past his previous career high for any professional season. So we're talking about combined across minor league. And so the Cubs still have, right, a month and a half left to play. He's going to make a bunch more starts. He's going to really push that career high. And he's going to, he hadn't pitched in a week, right? His last start was Saturday in Toronto. So because they had the 2 days off, so they were able to stretch that. But I am very, very concerned. They're going to have to pick up, right? We had the Tucker Barnhart DFA today, open up a 40-man spot. Does that go to a reliever who's coming off the 60-day IL? Does that go to somebody like Jordan Wicks? Does Ben Brown? I know they're working with Ben Brown on once he's healthy again, coming out of the bullpen. Does he get something there? Do we see Luke Little, who just came up? I think the Cubs want to get another left-hander in there. Little and Wicks would be great, but again, do you do that now before the roster expansion and it doesn't go out to 40 like it used to, right, to get to 28? But do you do that now? Do you wait a while? Do you put somebody in place of when Smiley's turn would be up in the rotation again? But they've got to do something to reinforce that rotation, because as you noted, right, the starters have had a much worse ERA than it's not great. The bullpen's not great, but it's about a run different. And as I said, if you basically the pitching has put them in a position where they have to score 5 runs in order to win. That's where it's been lately. So, yeah. And there's a lot of baseball left to play.
It's not like Jed Hoyer and company couldn't have seen this coming, right? I mean, like Justin Steele's been their best pitcher this year. They're largely leaning on him, and yet it's all you had to do was look to see how much usage you were getting out of him, and you could have expected that he was going to, start to trend down a little bit for sure. And then it feels like a trade deadline failure to me. Like I really think they could have fortified this pitching staff, and they just did not.
Yeah, and it was, interestingly enough, like neither did Cincinnati, and now they've been kind of hanging around. They shouldn't be. But interestingly enough, is there was a report that came out recently that Cincy had been targeting Brady Singer, who's the pitcher for the Royals, who's going against the Cubs today. He's been really, like, his overall numbers have not been great, but he's been really, really good over like his last 5 starts. Sinker slider guy. And so again, but I look at that and say, well, the Reds were targeting, could the Cubs have maybe gone after a guy like that, right? Could they have found someone? Interestingly, right, Kansas City, with whom they did make a trade, sending Nelson Velasquez out there for Jose Cuas, right? So the Cubs did trade with the Royals on pitching, but and Cuas has been pretty good, like surprisingly good.
Well, compared to the rest of the bullpen.
Yeah. But he's got that funky sidearm. It's interesting that they just picked up another dude off waivers from the Mets who's kind of got that low arm angle. I thought that was it. But yeah, cool. You can get these relievers, and, Boxberger and Birdie should be off the 60-day pretty soon. I mean, Ethan Roberts might be ready to go by the end of the year. Brandon Hughes, maybe. I mean, but those are all like 1-inning guys. And it's cool, right, if you can replace another person who's not as reliable, but the rotation is really in shambles right now. And Taillon, do you trust him game in and game out, right? I mean, he looked really good for a while, then he shit the bed, and then he gave up the big homer. Like he's still gonna be in there. With that, you're always gonna be like chewing your fingernails, right? Like, is he gonna make a mistake on this one? And when he does, how far is it gonna go? So I just and it's always like they have an uncanny ability to let the one dangerous player in Velasquez has been good lately, but like Bobby Witt Jr., you just can't. That's the one dude you can't let beat you, right?
It was Pete like Pete Alonso.
Yeah, just don't.
I mean, come on. There's one guy. You're right.
Yeah, pitch around him, put him on. If the next dude hits a homer and beats you, good for him. But like, make someone. Don't just. Oh,
and that's on Ross. That's on David Ross.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I think it certainly is, but and it's also, again, it's if you've got to know yourself too as a pitcher, and that was where Taillon had been making some improvements, right? Is having more conviction in the pitches he threw. I haven't seen that in the last. Well, I had to listen to it. Oh God, I had to listen to the last one on the radio. Sort of. I was driving back from Nashville, and the coverage is not great. Right. So I was trying to stream it through the audio app to my car stereo, but it had to buffer all the time. So I was only getting it in fits and spurts. But I just, with Tyon, I do feel like there are times when he doesn't feel convicted in the pitch that he's trying to throw, and as a result, he's going to leave that thing hanging. But yeah, it's look at what happened. We go back to I won't talk about the decision to bunt and all that great stuff, put runners on second and third, but the Mets were in a position then they could pitch around Nico Horner. Like they didn't throw him anything. It was like, we're not going to throw you anything you'll be able to hit. We're going to work this all outside the zone. If you chase at 1 or 2 and we can get in that situation, get a plus count, great, then maybe we attack. But that's where I'm like, Bobby Witt Jr. should not be seeing hittable pitches in that situation where he can beat you.
And that's the thing about David Ross is that I think David Ross is a great clubhouse manager. I think that much is clear. I think he struggles with in-game decisions.
Which is weird for a catcher, right?
Yeah, it is weird. And I mean, obviously when you're a catcher, you're not making all the decisions. You are kind of like the quarterback back there. But yeah, it's just some of the things that some of the decisions that he makes. And I think a lot of it is like on the offensive side of things, right? Like not necessarily defensive things. It's more like
he made a really good decision when he told Chris Morel to hit a 3-run homer the other day, right? He just called for the 3-run homer. Yeah, right. There you go.
Yeah. But I mean, in the decision, what was it? Morel against, I forget, was it against the Mets where he struck out?
Yeah, because Madrigal bunted and
he pinch hit that hole.
He pinch hit for Amaya with Madrigal and then had him bunt. And I know a lot of people are like, yeah, but that puts you in better position to get 2 runs with 1 hit. I'm like, yeah, but you gave up an out. So if you don't get that hit, which Morel did not, and he's a high strikeout dude coming up behind, it's checkers versus chess, right? You cannot play. You can't look at just that immediate situation and say, okay, this is what we're going to do with this, because you have to look at who is up next and what does that do for you situationally beyond that. And I just, again, when I look at a guy like Morel, who's just about as likely to hit an extra base hit as he is a single, then it doesn't matter that you've got 2 runners in scoring position. Like and as I noted on the last show, it actually again, I love how this goes, right? The thinking, well, you could get 2 runs with 1 hit. Sure, you could. You get 3 runs with a homer, as Morel just showed recently. Like, and if a frog had wings, he wouldn't bump his ass when he hopped. That's fine if we're looking at hypotheticals, but the millions and millions of data points show that giving up that free out is reducing your overall chance to score any runs. They needed 1. They didn't need 2, but
the Morel home run, that moment was great, but let's face it, the Cubs were on the verge of losing their 2nd straight game to the White Sox, and it was only because of a very unlikely home run by Morel that they got in, that they actually saved that. And since August 7th, not including Toronto, against sub 500 teams, they are 2-4. And could have very easily been 1-5. And so it's like, we looked at this stretch and thought, all right, man, here we are surging, moving up, a couple games out of first place and the easiest part of the schedule coming up. And it's like, so far it's been a major dud, and the Cubs are going to have to go on quite a run here to reverse it and to make it look kind of the outcome turn into what we thought it should be at the beginning of this stretch. And it's tough to imagine that, where you see the starting pitching struggling so much, knowing where Steele is in, kind of innings wise. And he goes today, so we'll see how he goes. And hopefully he comes out and does well. But I mean, no one's been particularly good except for Javier Assad, right? I mean, Tyon's been terrible. He's kind of back to how he was. Tyon had like a 5-6 game stretch where he was really good, but outside of those few games, like, he's been not great. He's been bad.
Yeah, that's the problem is you look at, and when I was speaking with just before we went on here, I was talking with Mark Grody on 670 The Score about some of this stuff, and there's something to be said. Talk about Steele, you talk about the innings, And with any pitcher, right, you could look at the number of pitches they throw in a game. Obviously, like if your team gets up 10-0 after 2 runs and you're pitching free and easy, each of those individual pitches is less taxing than if you're in a game where it's like 1-0, right? Just mentally, physically, like you're having to execute on everything. Similarly, we're looking at a situation in which, okay, Steele's coming in here. You've already lost the series opener, right? You're trying to gain ground, and these are high leverage. We could look at this and say it's not a good team, but that doesn't really matter when you're looking at you've lost 2 of your first 3 games on this homestand. You're 3 games out of the division. You're a game back in the wild card. Now you need to stack wins like over these next games, and then going in and facing who's up next, Detroit and then Pittsburgh. Right? Like they have to start winning these games before Milwaukee comes to now. Hey, could you sweep the Brewers if you're 3 games back? You sweep them 3 games, and now you're tied with them, or you could be back 2 games. You could take the lead. Sure, you could, but you don't want to go into that series thinking you have to sweep them to get the division lead. Like you want to be able to.
No, I mean the Cubs could come into that series. They could come into that series tied for the lead or a game up or 2 up, and really put some distance with a sweep between them and the Brewers. I mean, so that's really the difference of what we're looking at here is like, hey, if you want September to be exciting, I mean, it'll be exciting. I mean, but the Cubs, finish the season off with 3 against the Braves and then 3 against the Brewers. I mean, you better get yourself a lead before that happens. Now, it's a relatively easy road. I mean, they still have to play the Reds, the Giants, the D-backs. And the D-backs aren't playing great, but I mean, it's not, these aren't gimmies. And so it's like, you gotta take the ones you can get.
Yeah. And that's where I go back to the idea that, you've lost that first one. Like they need to win. You don't win today, you lose the series, no matter what happens on Sunday. Like,
and that's bad.
Having
That's
to play the role of
look.
stopper. Yeah. In addition to piling on the career high numbers on the innings and pitches thrown and all this stuff, like these are higher pressure situations. I'm not saying he can't handle that. We've seen before. I mean, the dude is nails. I'm not worried about that, but it is these innings and these pitches are more taxing than they would be if you swept the White Sox in 2 games and then won on Friday, right? So pushing for a 4th straight win is a hell of a lot better than, going out there and having dropped one. And I'll go back to that too. The one they won, as you noted, came on that big, they had the crazy walk-off comeback. Again, they still only got to 4 runs, right? And only won by 1. So of those games that I had noted, they're 2-6 in games where they score 4 runs or less this month. That's one of them. And the only reason they even got to 4 was because of 3-run walk-off homer, right? So it's incumbent upon that offense to get going early, not only because it'll give them some confidence, it'll rattle the Royals a little bit, but I really think Steele could benefit from having an easier path, right? Spot him some runs, let him go out there. Obviously, he's got to pitch to them first, but let him pitch in easier innings, right? Don't force him to go out there and be perfect. And I think that's because the Cubs really want to be easy with him and monitor those innings too. So how great would it be? Hey, get up 10-0 and then let him get pulled after 5, and then you can go back to the bullpen or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I mean, looking at the lineup today, this is the best Cubs lineup. I don't know why Ross ever, just doesn't keep with this lineup. I love Tauchman in center. I love Bellinger at first. Morel, DH, Candelario at third. You can swap him or Madrigal in at third. Suzuki and right, Gomes catching. I mean, I think this is our best lineup. This is the Cubs' best lineup. And I just kind of wish that Ross would stop tinkering with it.
And I feel like he's settled down. Like we're seeing more after, Suzuki came back from his little kind of 3-day hiatus or whatever. And now you're seeing, hey, Tauchman leading off in center, Bellinger at first. Like stop putting Wisdom in there against left-handed pitchers like it's some kind of a platoon advantage. It is not. To me, Patrick Wisdom needs to be a backup, like a pinch hitter. Hey,
he's a pinch hitter.
Hit a bomb. Let it because the defense, not great, man. Putting him over there at we don't need to capitalize everything, Becky. Doesn't all need to be capitalized. It's cool. No yelling. We're not yelling. But it's and Candelario needs to stay at third. Like, here's the thing, because I was looking at it today, because I saw something about this, and it's funny, and part of this was spurred, and I just went ahead and blocked this person on Facebook who was doing this. Like, there was a guy from a while back, right before he was either when or right before Madrigal got sent down. And let's bear in mind, Madrigal was brutal through that first stretch up until the end of May when he got sent. Like, he was bad. Okay, like a 63 WRC plus.
He hasn't been great lately either.
No, and this is what I'm getting to. So, and there's some comments going back and forth and thing, and the person was like, and he was batting like 267 too, right? So 267 is better than Wisdom, but there's zero power. So Wisdom's only batting 228. Like, yeah, he's got 12 home runs or whatever it was at the time. Like, that's far more valuable than Madrigal with what he was doing, right? Like that's just the way it works. It's like he needs to go down, work on some of these things, and so then when he came back up and started hitting, this person popped back in there, a month and a half later, but whoa, what are you saying now? I'm like, yeah, moron. He went down to AAA and worked on those things, and then came back and then was good. He was bad at the time, but ever since that IL with the hammy, and let's go back to last year, he had the groin and the hamstring issues. This is a dude, and then the person popped back up on Facebook to be like, whoa, what about that home run? And so then I was just like, you're getting blocked if you keep popping back up, because that home run aside, he still only got an 83 WRC plus since he came back from, that includes the home run, since he came back off the IL. Madrigal, his hit tool has to be exemplary in order for him to be valuable to the team. Like, he's got to be batting 330
right now. Since I keep looking back to August 7th, because that's kind of when the Mets, they started playing the Mets, and they kind of have fallen apart. And if you look at some of the batting averages, you've got Madrigal, who has a 143 average. He has no walks over that time period, only 15 plate appearances. Wisdom, with 10 plate appearances, is actually batting 300 with a 600 slugging. Now that's what you want. That's a guy that's where you want Wisdom, is you want to use him like a Swiss Army knife, right? You want to be able to put him into key situations and have him produce. He's not an everyday guy. And I'm just starting to wonder, like, is Madrigal going to pop back? Like, what's the true value of Madrigal to this Chicago Cubs team? It's like, yeah, he was great there for a little while, but now he's so streaky, it doesn't seem like there's any consistency.
Yeah, I mean, how much? Look at last year, like when he finally toward the end of last year got healthy with the leg stuff, he started hitting okay, but it was terrible before. And again, you're going to get zero power from it. I know some people are like, he just hit a home run, but like hitting 2 home runs a season is not power, right?
It was a basket shot that was like super high up into the wind.
Yeah, so it was a wind aided deal, but when he's right, and he started getting right about the time, was it the London series? Was it in there? That was later in June, but because I think he came back up June 9th. But he was like really good through that period, and then until he hurt the hamstring again. And I don't know if that's just his body in general is just susceptible to those the leg injuries, but we've seen the hamstring multiple times. The groin has been something that's come up. It takes him a long time to recover from it. If he's not 100% from a physical standpoint, if he is not perfectly healthy, it's obvious it disrupts his timing. He's not as good as what he needs to be. And again, this is a dude who basically has to be hitting 320, like 325 at a minimum. He has to bat, right? Because he's not going to walk, right? We've seen that. He's not an on-base guy. He doesn't have much power. He's not a very smart runner. And so you're super limited in where you can put him. And we've seen it, right, for a long time. And I think he's been passable at third base. He's been better than I expected at third base. But as we saw the other day on one, if he's got to dive for a play and then make that long throw without being able to kind of shuffle step into it, there's no way in hell he's getting somebody on even a hard shot. He just doesn't have to dive the arm strength. Yeah, it's just not going to happen. And so, again, is he a dude who, use him as a pinch hitter? You know what I mean? If he's batting well and you put him at second base or whatever. But I just don't know when you have this group of dudes coming up, when you start looking at, so he's like, hey, Matt Shaw, right? Dude's already at Double-A. right, or whatever. Probably should be, or he should be anyway. I mean, he could be up with the Cubs next year. Now, you tell me, do you want Matt Shaw, Big Ten Player of the Year, dude who can hit 500-foot homers and can play second or third or whatever? Do you want him, or do you want Nick Madrigal?
I want at this point, Nick Madrigal is like, to me, like Larry Boa was back in the 80s. Like,
yeah,
but not as good defensively.
Right, I mean, he's there. I just at some point now that granted, Candelario will be gone next year, and I don't see Wisdom as being long for this team either. But that Madrigal is a guy who you put in there if you have no other choice, and you just hope that he can stay totally healthy and hit well. But it's not. I've said that from the beginning of the season. Like, there's not an ideal fit for him anywhere. Again, give me James Triantos, Matt Shaw, one of any number of dudes out there. But I just like I said, the ceiling is so low. I think that's the thing. Like, the floor, Madrigal's floor is a lot higher than Wisdom's. Just because of, again, Wisdom could go into that slump where he's striking out 50% of the time and not making any contact at all. So Madrigal will typically be, but the ceiling with Madrigal is far lower. Like, his ceiling is he's really more of he's a first floor, he's a ranch style home, right? Whereas Wisdom's got a basement and a second floor. Like, he could be lower, but he'd also be a lot higher, because guess what happens when Patrick Wisdom gets hot? He's driving balls out of the yard 450 feet away, and that's far more valuable than slapping singles, into the hole on the opposite side. So,
and so the Cubs just DFA'd Tucker Barnhart. I think that was kind of a surprise. Was and it's to make room on the 40 man, but was Mastroboni not on the Mastroboni was on the 40 man though, right?
That's how we got. Yeah, that's how we. But they just had to bring him up for the active roster.
So what's the DFA? What's the purpose of the DFA? I mean, you think they're going to add like PCA maybe?
I don't think so yet. I think it'll be either Nick Birdie or Brad Boxberger for now. It could very well be Jordan Wicks to take Smiley's spot in the rotation when that comes up next. And then eventually they can make some other moves for PCA. But I think they'll probably wait on some of those guys who aren't on because the two relievers, Birdie and Boxberger, were on the 40 man and are only off because they're on the 60-day IL. So in order to activate one of them, you have to have a space free on the 40 man. But with guys who aren't on the 40 man at all, like PCA, Wicks maybe, again, because he'd be perhaps taking that spot start. You look at like Ben Brown once he gets healthy again. I mentioned Luke Little, right? They aren't on the 40 man and would need a spot, but I also think they'll probably wait until rosters expand, because realistically, for PCA to come up, he's still going to be more of he's not going to be a starting outfielder.
And that's why I honestly don't see like the value of bringing PCA up this year at all. I think they should just keep him down in AAA, but they do need pitching help.
Yeah. And that's so I think it's one way or the other. I think more immediately this would be for one of those relievers to be able to come up, and that's my sense anyway, because I know those guys have both been throwing live and they've been shut down for a while. But here's the other thing though with PCA, I could definitely see him coming up. Do not call him up. Why would you not call him up? I mean, you only call him up if he's going to start, because there's no reason to bring him up.
You don't want to take playing time away from him.
Yeah, I would do it late. I mean, hell, I'd love to have him up there late, like by the time things have wound down with Iowa. Yeah, let him come up, be a pinch runner, be a defensive replacement out there for somebody, right? You want to do that. I mean, hell, bring him, do what you got to do, right? Let him do some of those little extra things once it's out of that. But there's no reason. Mike Tauchman, everyday center fielder, Cody Bellinger, everyday first baseman.
Yeah.
If you need to move things around, you put Belly out in center. There's just no reason to waste PCA's talent. And it's not even wasting his talent. It's just not letting him get every day at bats. So, and the iCubs are in Indianapolis this week. So I'm looking forward to, I don't want him called up now because I want to be able to go and watch him play. So.
Fair enough. So the Cubs have 2 more against the Royals. They have a chance to save things here and get to 4-4 since August 7th against sub 500 teams. If they win the next 2 days, boy, it sure does look a lot better with 3 at Detroit and then 4 at Pittsburgh before they come back to Wrigley Field against the Brewers. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over this next week. We'll try to circle back with another show next week and talk about what's happened. And I hope we're talking about the Cubs being either tied for first place or in first place in the NL Central. But I guess we'll see how that plays out, huh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, being in first and running off, like, I would just like to see them, it felt so great when they went on that really hot stretch right before the deadline, right? Like,
yeah.
And they could really use that, right? It goes without saying, right? They could really use another one of those and just really get after it, beat up on some of these teams. Yeah, scoring a bunch of runs.
They just need to start scoring runs. I mean, the pitching problem is not going away, but they need to start scoring runs against some of these subpar teams.
Yeah, that's really where it needs to happen. And like I said, it doesn't. They've run into. I mean, Kansas City was playing pretty good baseball before this for a little stretch there too. And I'm telling you, now he could revert, but the guy that they've got going today, the Cubs are facing a pretty darn good pitcher. He's a sinker slider, but the slider has been the biggest difference. He's not a big strikeout guy, although that has been creeping up because he's dialed the slider back in. And so you're looking at a dude who, if they can jump on the sinker, he leaves it over the plate quite a bit, leaves it in the middle of the zone a lot. They really need to jump on that because if not, that slider has been really nasty all season. Has been really, really good over the last month or so. And that's one of those things, right, that could really get them in trouble if they're not able to spit on it. And if he's landing it for strikes, because if he is getting the slider in there for strikes, he'll get a lot of called right on that lower glove side corner, right inside the lefties, outside the righties. And if that's happening, he could mow through the order pretty quick. So we'll see. But fingers crossed they can get out there and hang 5, and that usually spells a win. Yep,
there you go. All right. Well, until next week, thanks for joining us. We will see you later. Enjoy the game.
Cool. See you.
See you.